Morning, everybody. Well, many of you know that during my daily Bible reading or just listening to the Bible on tape or whatever it is, there's sometimes when you're listening and there's just a phrase that jumps off the page to you, or as soon as it's said, your brain starts working, you start wondering, you start having all kinds of thoughts that might come into your head. It might be, I have no idea what that said and I got to go search for about 30 minutes what that means. But other times it's just, I got to go tell somebody about that. I have to talk about that. And this week's lesson is going to be very similar to lessons in the past I've done like that, because there was a phrase as I was just doing my daily read and it jumped off the page. And so what I'd like to do is just go to where that phrase is, really dive deep into it. I want us to sort of see things with our ears and with our eyes if we can this morning, make it very real for us, and then just offer a few applications at the end. The phrase that jumped off the page for me was this one: help my unbelief. Help my unbelief. And it's a wonderful passage, and I'm really excited to dive into it together. So if you will, go to Mark chapter 9. Mark chapter 9, please. I think it's just 16 verses long. And we're going to spend all of our time just in Mark 9. I'm going to mention a couple other passages, but this is going to be a great spot for you to be this morning. Mark chapter 9. And if you think about where we are in the gospel story at this point, we're after what's one of the really major shifts in the gospel story, where Peter, for the first time, really voices what all of the apostles are thinking. We think that you, Jesus, are the Messiah. We think that you are the Son of the living God. And from that point, a whole lot of stuff starts changing. From that point on, Jesus begins very openly saying, okay, I am going to Jerusalem, I'm going to be killed, and I'm going to rise on the third day. And we see after every time Jesus says that, but they didn't understand what he was talking about. But he's being very open about what he's going to do. And then what's amazing in Mark chapter 9, at the beginning of Mark chapter 9, there's this amazing scene where Jesus is on a mountain. He takes with him Peter, James, and John. And Jesus is transfigured there on the mountain. He's changed before their eyes. His clothing became radiant and his face was bright, bright white. And if that wasn't enough for them, they see Moses and they see Elijah. And the voice of the Father, when Peter says, hey, it's good for us to be here. Let's make 3 tabernacles for each of you people. The voice of the Father speaks to them and says, this is my beloved Son. You listen to him. Not Moses, not Elijah. So you think about Peter, James, and John. They have this indisputable, undeniable evidence of who Jesus is now. And what's even crazier is after that, Jesus says, don't tell anybody about that. Don't tell anybody until after I'm resurrected. So that is what happens right before what we're going to read this morning. Sort of sets the stage for us. If you think about being Peter, James, or John, and you've just seen this, you know who Jesus is. What do you expect, everyday life is going to be like? I'm going to wager that it's not what they come to immediately as soon as they come down from the mountain. So let's just read this whole section, and then we'll come back and sort of break it down. So chapter 9, look at verse 14 with me, please. Verse 14. And we'll read down to verse 29, please. Verse 14. When they came back to the disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and some scribes arguing with them. Immediately, when the entire crowd saw him, they were amazed, and they began running up to greet him. And he asked them, what are you discussing with them? And one of the crowd answered him, Teacher, I brought you my son, possessed with a spirit which makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it slams him to the ground, and he foams at the mouth, and he grinds his teeth and stiffens out. I told your disciples to cast it out, and they could not do it. And he answered them and said, O unbelieving generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him to me. They brought the boy to him, and when he saw him, immediately the spirit threw him into a convulsion, and falling to the ground, he began rolling around and foaming at the mouth. And he asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood. It has often thrown him into both the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, if you can, all things are possible to him who believes. Immediately, the boy's father cried out and said, I do believe, help my unbelief. And when Jesus saw that a crowd was rapidly gathering, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, you deaf and mute spirit, I command you, come out of him. Do not enter him again. After crying out and throwing him into terrible convulsions, it came out. And the boy became so much like a corpse that most of them said, he is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and raised him, and he got up. But when he came into the house, his disciples began questioning him privately, "Why could we not drive it out?" And he said to them, "This kind cannot come out by anything but prayer." This is a crazy story. I mean, this is a wild ride, and I'm really excited to just dive in to some of the details that are in this story. It's really an amazing thing. So let's reread just a couple verses, and then we'll really dig in. Look back at verses 14 through 16 with me, and let's dig into this. Verse 14 through 16. When they came back to the disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and some scribes arguing with them. Immediately when the entire crowd saw him, they were amazed and began running up to greet him. He asked them, "What are you discussing with them?" Okay, so remember where we are. Jesus has just been transfigured on the mountain with Peter, James, and John. The four of them just came down from the mountain, and the first thing that they encounter as they come down from the mountain is this hubbub of people arguing, this hubbub of people discussing, and a crowd gathering around them. And we get to see some of the characters who's involved in this. It's Jesus' disciples, and it's the scribes who are arguing with each other while a crowd was coming around them. What do you think they were arguing about? What do you think they were discussing, your translation might say? We know because we just read the whole thing, the disciples couldn't cast out this demon. They couldn't do it. And so if you remember who one of Jesus' chief targets was when he was openly rebuking people, who was one of Jesus' chief targets? It was the scribes. These scribes are experts in the Mosaic law, and they have received a lot of heat from Jesus. And so when they find out, oh, Jesus' disciples couldn't cast out a demon, what do you think they're going to do? It's my opportunity, time to pounce, because if they couldn't do it, Jesus is their rabbi. I bet Jesus can't do it. So what do you think they're arguing about? Jesus is not who he says he is. You all think you're so much better than us, or you think you know more than us. He's been rebuking us like crazy, and look at this. You can't even cast out this demon. The scribes didn't cast it out either, by the way. But they sure pounced on the failure of the disciples to cast out this demon. And so Jesus and the other three apostles who were with him, they come down to the mountain and they see this scene. And the people see Jesus. And what does it say? It says they were amazed. They were astonished and they ran to him. And I wonder why that is. Honestly, I'm really not too sure. Some people have suggested that from the transfiguration that he was still radiant, or there was something about him that looked different. And maybe that's the case. But it would also kind of fly in the face of Jesus saying, "Don't tell anybody until after I'm resurrected." So it could just be they didn't expect to see Jesus right now. Maybe they just didn't expect, whatever it is. Or it could be his general aura, just something about him. People are talking about him. And so they're amazed. They rush to him. And why do you think they rush to him? Oh, here we go. What's going to happen? We've been arguing about, is Jesus really who he says he is? Okay, your disciples can't cast out this demon. What's Jesus going to do now? So they rush over to Jesus, and Jesus cuts right to the chase, verse 16. What are you discussing with them? Your translation might say, what are you arguing about with them? And so it's just really, really interesting to me, this whole thing that's going to happen. And there's going to be some really odd discussions and odd interactions, and I'm really excited to dive in a little bit more. So let's see who answers the question. Jesus is addressing the people who just rushed to him. What are you arguing about? Remember who was arguing? The disciples and the scribes. But we're going to see the disciples don't answer the question, and the scribes don't answer the question. It's somebody else. Let's reread verses 17 and 18. Let's reread those verses. One of the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought you my son, possessed with a spirit which makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it slams him to the ground. He foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth and stiffens out. I told your disciples to cast it out, and they could not do it." And so, especially because of what we've already read, the whole section here, this is a father of a son who speaks out. Likely not even the people who are arguing, the disciples and the scribes, but it's a father of a son who cries out. And he says, "I brought to you my demon-possessed son, and I wanted you to cast him out," but likely because Jesus is on the mountain with Peter, James, and John, he goes to the next best thing, which is Jesus' disciples. And they couldn't do it. And if you remember, Jesus had given his apostles and even 70 disciples at one time the ability to miraculously heal people, the ability to cast out demons, and they did it successfully. Over in Luke 10, I think it's in verse 17, the 70 returned and they said, "Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name." So they had cast out demons before. They were able to do it before, but they couldn't do it here. And it seems like this is a really bad case of demon possession because the Father says here that it makes him mute. It seizes him. It slams him to the ground. He foams at the mouth. He grinds his teeth. He becomes rigid. He stiffens out. And your disciples couldn't cast that demon out. So these symptoms are a lot like epilepsy. If you've ever seen somebody have an epileptic surgery, an epileptic seizure. Somebody help me out here. Epileptic seizure. You've seen that. But one of the things that we must not do is think that this was only epilepsy. Because the divine commentary in Mark chapter 9 shows us that this was demon possession. And this is sort of a side note, but one of the fascinating things I really encourage you to do, go through your entire New Testament and tally up the number of demon possessions and where they happen. Because the peak number of demon possessions is in the Gospels. And then as you go further in time, the number dwindles and dwindles and dwindles and dwindles to zero. Why do you think that is? I think it served a specific purpose. It proves who Jesus is, who Jesus' true messengers are, and then once there was no need for the miraculous signs to be taking place, they were done away with. And so, if there's somebody who has an epileptic seizure, let's go, first time, today, I don't think it's demon possession. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's demon possession today. But we cannot deny the divine commentary from Mark 9. This was a demon that caused this. And it was scary, and not even the disciples who could cast out demons before could cast this demon out. This was a scary, serious demon possession that's going on here. I'd say, okay, how would you respond based on what you know about Jesus, based on what you know about the Gospels? How would you expect Jesus to respond to this request? This is a father of a son saying, nobody can cast these demons out, so we brought them to you. I'll tell you what my expectation is. Based on what I know about Jesus and a lot of other passages, it's moved with great compassion, instantly heal this little boy. That's what I expect. But that is not at all what Jesus does here. So let's keep reading. Let's see this. Look at verse 19 and 20 with me, please. 19 and 20. Jesus answered them and said, "O unbelieving generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him, and when he saw him, immediately the spirit threw him into a convulsion. Falling to the ground, he began rolling around and foaming at the mouth. That doesn't really meet my expectations of what I thought Jesus would do in this situation. Jesus rebukes them, and it's a pretty serious rebuke too. He says, "You unbelieving," your translation might say, "you faithless generation." He says, "How long am I going to be with you?" He says, "How long must I put up with you? Bring him to me." So Jesus rebukes them for their lack of faith. Is that what you would expect in this situation? That's not what I would expect in this situation. But he is condemning them for their lack of faith in who he is. Especially, you think about who's in this crowd. The scribes, who are experts in the Mosaic law, they should know beyond anybody else exactly who Jesus is. And yet they deny him over and over and over again. And so we see Jesus do this several times, where he rebukes unbelieving Jews who should have known better, who should have accepted who he is, and he pronounces judgment on them, and that would come in about 35 years from this point. But remember where we are in the gospel story too. This is after sort of the big shift. Peter has said what the disciples are all hoping and thinking: "You're the Christ. You're the Son of the living God." Jesus has just been transfigured on the mountain. He's been changed. And Peter, James, and John hear, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him, nobody else." And the first thing that Jesus has to deal with right after that indisputable declaration of who Jesus is as he's on mission to go to Jerusalem, to die and rise on the third day, do the most important events in the history of the universe, he has to deal with the lack of faith of people who should know better. I think Jesus is exasperated by this. He's exasperated by the lack of faith that's on clear display. Even with his disciples, we're going to see they're rebuked a little bit later. He's exasperated by this. But in all of his exasperation, what does he say at the end? He still says, "Bring him to me." He's exasperated by their lack of faith, and yet he's still merciful and gracious enough to say, "Bring him to me. Bring him to me." And I love that. He is still faithful. So in verse 20, they bring this boy to Jesus, but immediately upon seeing him, the demon, the unclean spirit that's inside this boy, throws a hissy fit. I mean, immediately. It throws this boy into convulsions. It makes him roll on the ground and foam at the mouth. And I really love to study what demons do and what demons say when they are in the presence of Jesus. Because if you want a confidence booster that you don't need to be unhealthily afraid of demons, look at that. Because when Jesus is present, they are terrified and they know that they're done. Why would this demon throw this boy into these convulsions at the sight of Jesus? It knows that its time is limited. He sees the true master of the universe. He knows, well, I might as well just injure this boy as much as I can now because it's over for me. I have no hope left. There's no way that I can prevent what's about to happen to me. And so this demon tries to really harm this boy as much as he can before he knows, or it knows, what is about to happen. Okay, this demon is already a defeated enemy before Jesus has even cast it out. And I think that's really important for us to see. Okay, so now, what would you expect Jesus to do now? Think about this. The Father has just made this plea. Jesus rebukes them, and he says, bring the boy to me. So they bring this boy, and here is this boy. We don't know exactly how old he is, by the way, but the Greek word that's used there is used of little children. Here's this boy thrashing on the ground, rolling around, foaming at the mouth. What do you expect Jesus' reaction to be? If you're like me, I expect, okay, great compassion, time to instantly heal. But he doesn't do that. Let's keep reading. Look at verse 21 through 24. 21 through 24. Jesus asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood. It has often thrown him both into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, if you can, all things are possible to him who believes. Immediately the boy's father cried out and said, I do believe, help my unbelief. So again, this is really odd to me. This is not what I expect Jesus' interaction would be based on what we see in a lot of other places. I would just expect, boy is thrashing on the ground, suffering from demon possession. Jesus feels great compassion, instantly healed. But he doesn't. It's almost like he's watching it happen, and he asks the father, how long has this been happening to him? Remember, this boy is thrashing on the ground while all of this is happening. How long has this been happening to him? And the father says, from childhood. And I wonder if there was a little pause where nobody said anything. We don't know, so I'm not saying there was, but I wonder if there was, because this father starts to give more information that Jesus didn't ask about. The only question that Jesus asked was, how long has this been happening to him? The question was answered, from childhood. But then the father, I think in rising desperation, starts giving more details to Jesus in hopes that Jesus will heal his son. See, those details are, well, it often has thrown him into the fire and water to destroy him, to try and kill him. So maybe this will move you to compassion. Maybe this will make you heal my son. He says, but if you can do anything, take pity on us and heal him. Have compassion on us and heal him. And again, especially as a parent, if your child is thrashing on the ground and there's nothing you can do to help them, I think this father is just crying out in desperation, rising in his whole persona. If you can do anything, please help my son. This has been happening from childhood. This demon tries to kill him, tries to destroy him. Please just do something. And what he says is, if you can do anything, then please have compassion on us. Okay, so now, based on what you know about Jesus, what would your expectation be to this heartfelt, if you can do anything, please heal my son? Okay, move with compassion, instantly heal him. Jesus doesn't do that here. He calls him out on one 3-word phrase in what he said that really reveals a lot about something this father has going on. He says, if you can, anything is possible to those who believe. Everything is possible for those who believe. So instead of, remember, boy is thrashing on the ground before them. Instead of move with compassion, instantly heal this boy, it is, you have a lesson that you need to learn before this takes place. And if I'm the father with my son thrashing there like he has from childhood, and you are in front of the only person in the universe that you think can actually do it, I am heartbroken as all get out at this point. I hope you're trying to put yourself in this situation. And Jesus calls him out, if you can. The father here does not know who Jesus truly is, might be limiting his power in some way because he doesn't fully understand who Jesus is. Now remember, Peter has just acknowledged what all the apostles are thinking and hoping about Jesus, that he's the Christ, that he's the Son of the living God, but we know that they didn't understand it. And I think this father is probably in the same boat. He calls him teacher here. He doesn't call him Lord. He doesn't call him master. He calls him teacher. Maybe Jesus is just an amazing teacher who can heal people. And so maybe he's the only one who can. But I think Jesus points little bit deeper. I want you to think about who I am and what you're actually saying if you say, if you can. And so Jesus is essentially telling him, it's not a question of if I can, it's a question of will I? Will I do it? Jesus has every right to say yes. He has every right to say no. He has every right to say not right now, not in that way. Jesus has every right to do that. So he's rebuking this father for the lack of faith in who he is and Jesus' power. If this man realized who Jesus really is, he would know it's not a question of if you can, it's a question of if he will. And then this is where this phrase comes from on the slide. I love what the father says here. It is so relatable, and I hope that you relate to this. He says, immediately he cried out, and some manuscripts actually include with tears here. So it's possible, immediately the father cried out with tears, I do believe, help my unbelief. What an amazing phrase for this man to say. Has anybody ever said something like that? I sure have. It's so relatable. This man's son has been demon-possessed for years. There's been nothing he can do about it. Jesus' disciples couldn't cast it out. And here's the only man that he has any hope in at all that can cast this demon out. And he's being rebuked for not believing in the power of Jesus. Yeah, I think the desperation has built up to the point where he is acknowledging Jesus' rebuke. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get defensive. He doesn't say, well, you're wrong about that. Heal my son. He says, I do believe, help my unbelief. He acknowledges his wavering faith. He has the humility to acknowledge my faith is not flawless. I do have doubt. I do have issues here. And this man is not asking for Jesus to miraculously increase his faith to a point where, okay, now you deserve, now you've earned for me to heal your son. This man is crying out that even though I have imperfect faith, even though I have flawed faith, please still help me. Help me, please, even in my flawed state. And that's why this is so relatable. Does anybody else relate to that? Yeah, I appreciate the head nods. That gives me a lot of very instant, whatever the word I'm looking for is. It is the strength of this man's faith that allows him to admit the weakness of his faith. It's his humility that allows him to do this. So here's another pinch point in this passage. What's Jesus' reaction going to be at this point? What's it going to be? Maybe it's not going to be what we expect. Maybe it will be what we expect. And remember, all the while, this boy is currently thrashing on the ground. So this is really impacting a lot of people at this time. Let's reread 25 through 27, please. 25 through 27. When Jesus saw that a crowd was rapidly gathering, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, you deaf and mute spirit, I command you, come out of him. Do not enter him again. After crying out, throwing him into terrible convulsions, it came out, and the boy became so much like a corpse that most of them said, he is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand, and he raised him, and he got up. It's really interesting to me that we get that there was a crowd rapidly gathering about them. Some have suggested that Jesus only did this because of the crowd that was gathering. But if you read the Gospels, Jesus doesn't like crowds. He has purposefully offended large numbers, and they have left him because they couldn't accept the hard truths. Jesus frequently has a crowd around him, and he leaves them to go be alone for a while, to go be on a mountain, to go pray to God. And so it's not about the crowd. It's not because of the crowd that Jesus does this, but he notices the crowd. And I do believe that it's because of the humility of the Father here that Jesus performs this amazing, amazing miracle. And think about what Jesus says and how this would affect the Father and then maybe the boy later if he couldn't understand what was happening now. Jesus commands that this deaf and mute spirit come out of the boy. But not only that, he says, and never enter him again. Never. How do you think this father that has been crying out to Jesus would hear that? How do you think that would affect him? Never enter him again. For years, this demon has possessed his son, tormented his life, and tormented the father's life because that's his son. And one of the parallel accounts says it was his only son whom he loved. So for him to hear Jesus say, and never enter him again, the comfort, unreal. And so then this demon, again, do you think this demon had free will to say, nah, not going to do that? No. This demon has to. The commander of the universe is present. He commanded. It can't help it. But he's sure going to put up a fight. on the way out. This demon was shrieking. Let's see where it is. Verse 25, the end of verse 25. Or I'm sorry, verse 26. Crying out, throwing him into terrible convulsions, it came out. So this boy who's been thrashing on the ground is cast into even more terrible convulsions than he already was. And this demon shrieks and does all this damage so that even though the demon is gone, this boy is lying so still that, what does it say there? That many were saying he's dead. There's no way somebody could survive this. So this is not just like someone having a light seizure on the ground and maybe somebody holds them and it'll be all better. This was scary. This was an intense situation. And Jesus just takes the boy by the hand, lifts him up, and he's fine. How amazing is that? This is an amazing account. Think about the father, think about the boy, think about the crowds here. This would have been just an unbelievable thing. Any damage that this demon had done to the boy is gone. And he stands up and he's just fine. Unbelievable. This is exactly what the father hoped for, but was not fully confident in. And the power of Jesus is absolute over the forces of darkness. So we don't need to be unhealthily afraid. We don't. So think about now if you are one of the disciples. Because remember how all of this started. There was an argument at the beginning because the disciples could not cast out this demon. And Jesus just says, I command you and never do it again. And he's gone. So imagine you're the disciples and we get a little insight into this. Look at verses 28 and 29 again. 28 and 29. When Jesus came into the house, his disciples began questioning him privately. Why could we not drive it out? And he said to them, this kind cannot come out by anything but prayer. So they want to know, we've cast out demons before. Why couldn't we cast this one out? And some translations include this kind can only come out by prayer and fasting here. And what are we talking about here? Did Jesus pray or fast right before this happened? Not that I know of. Maybe it's there and you can help me later, but is it the physical act of praying? Is it the physical act of fasting that casts out demons? I don't really think so. I think what Jesus is trying to get at is, what is the purpose of prayer and what is the purpose of fasting? It is complete and utter dependence on God and the knowledge that we can do absolutely nothing of ourselves. And so it's possible that these disciples maybe were like, hey, we've cast out demons before, let's go get this one, trusting in themselves more than complete and utter dependence on Jesus alone. I don't know. What's also fascinating in a parallel account of this in Matthew 17, this is where Jesus rebukes the disciples and he says, it's because of the littleness of your faith. If you had the faith like a mustard seed, you would tell this mountain, rise up and be moved, and it would do it. Anything is possible to those who believe. So you have this father who's been rebuked for his lack of faith. You have the crowd who's rebuked for their lack of faith. And now you even have the disciples themselves being rebuked for their lack of faith. And Jesus is encouraging them, complete and utter dependence on God is the only way. That's the only way that you do anything in this life, but specifically with these demons. It's nothing about themselves. It's all about God. Man, what a powerful and unbelievable section of Scripture. And there's so many things that we could talk about in this. I really just want to mention two things that really stick out to me of the many things here. And I hope that you sort of see this scene with your eyes, in your mind's eye, or however you want to describe that. But I've been trying to really make it real this morning. And I just want to bring out two things from this passage. And the first one is this, is that honest faith is powerful. Honest faith is powerful. This father was rebuked for limiting Jesus' power. Because he said, if you can do anything, please have compassion and help us. And Jesus said, if you can, really checking him on limiting who Jesus is. And this father accepted that rebuke. Instead of being angry or saying, you don't know what you're talking about, he accepted the rebuke. And I just love his response. He pleads to Jesus in a raw and honest and authentic faith, which is, I do believe, help my unbelief. I know that my faith is flawed. I know that it's imperfect. Please help me anyway. And Jesus doesn't turn that down. This is honest, flawed, authentic faith in Jesus that realizes it's not perfect, it's not flawless, but he is, and I'm going to cry out anyway. And that honest faith is powerful. God does not require for us today to be flawless. We can't be. God doesn't require for us to never go through times of doubt, to go through times of fear, to go through times of struggle. He doesn't expect that of us. Our prayers to God don't have to be polished. They don't have to be buttoned up. We don't have to get our act together first before God hears us. The Lord wants us to honestly pursue Him and honestly lean on Him with everything that we have. And if we think that we have to be perfect first before God will hear us, we have severely missed the point. We have severely missed it. Authentic dependence on God is powerful because the God we're depending on is powerful. Not about the size of our faith, but the size of the God that we put our faith in. Our honest, raw, authentic faith in God is powerful, not because of anything that we've done or not anything that we deserve. So, in our prayers, in our singing together, in our personal Bible time, in just the way that we interact with one another, let's not fake it. Let's not fake it. Honest, authentic, raw faith is powerful. So let's not fake it. Have you ever been praying something and you try to finesse God? I bet you have. I've done it. You're saying a prayer and it's like, well, this time of struggle has been really good for my character building, and I don't even want you to fix the problem. I think I'm learning a lot, and you should just let me stay in this. I see smiles because we've done it. It's like, yeah, I think I've learned my lesson and I could just sit here forever. When really, if we could say, God, I am struggling so hard and you already know, please, God, help me. That honest, raw, authentic faith is powerful. We don't have to be polished. We don't have to be buttoned up. And that is such a comfort. Or when we're together, when we interact with one another, it's just too easy for us to never express our struggles, to express our doubts, to express our fears. And honest faith that isn't perfect, that is flawed, is still powerful because it's placed in God and not in us. And so that leads us to the last point this morning, which is our faith has to be in Jesus and not in ourselves. Our faith has to be in Jesus and not in ourselves. And it seems like an obvious one. We probably talk about it every other week. But if you're anything like me, I need to hear this every single day. The disciples here, the disciples who had cast out demons before, they could not cast this demon out. No matter what they did, no matter how flawlessly they were pretending to live their lives or flawlessly they were pretending to be, they could not cast out this demon. Nothing was going to change that. These scribes who were experts in the Mosaic law, there was no amount of perfect knowledge that could make them cast out this demon. This father here who pleads in this raw, authentic faith, there was nothing he could do to deserve for Jesus to heal his son. And yet, Jesus did it anyway. Because when he realized it's nothing to do with me, my faith is flawed, help my unbelief, that's when Jesus said, I'm going to heal this boy. I'm going to heal him. So all three groups in this story needed to learn that powerful biblical faith is only in God and not in themselves. Not in themselves. And so for us today, we can really shift the focus and we can really shift the attention to where I've got to be flawless, I have to know everything the right way, and I have to earn my salvation, as if there were some point where we would deserve what Jesus offers to us. And in America specifically, we've got to fight that self-reliant gene. We really do. We've got to fight against it because we can't. We need to know there is no amount of good works that we can do. There is no amount of correct knowledge, and there is no amount of self-reliance that will ever, ever, ever save us. There's nothing that we can do to save ourselves. It is only by the grace of God, through complete and utter dependence on Him, that we can have anything. And when we know that, and especially when we know that just a little bit of raw, authentic faith in Him is powerful, I hope that we'll give our lives to Him. I hope we will. And that's where I want to end this morning, because that's powerful stuff. All power, all glory, all honor, all praise belong only to God forever and ever and ever. And what's amazing about that is that Jesus' perfection will work through my imperfection perfectly. Every time. And it just takes a little bit of faith. That's all it takes. So as we close this morning, if you want to study the scriptures about Jesus and learn what He offers, we would just be tickled pink. We would love to do that with you. Or if you studied the scriptures and you know that you can't earn it, you don't deserve it, but Jesus offers it to you anyway, and you want to join His family His way in covenant relationship and be immersed in the waters of baptism. We've got water, and again, we would love to do that. We'd love to assist you with that. Or if your faith has been wavering and you need the prayers of the congregation, or we can help you in any way that we can, there's an opportunity now while together we're going to stand and sing.